Hello, my name is Mark Asmus and I'm with Beyond Software. In this video you will see a complete overview of the Financials suite within Beyond Software. We'll start out by taking a look at the General Ledger module. We will go into the Financials menu, under Setup, Account Group Policies. You can start by seeing there are some flexible options in terms of defining your company, account, and subsequent sub-account breakouts. You can define the full field name captions, you can define abbreviated captions, how large the fields are, and whether you want to allow letters or stick with numbers. You can also optionally decide whether you really need a full 5-segment breakout, and you can turn off segments that you might not use. Once this is defined, you can see the actual chart of accounts by opening the Account Group Definition screen. And here you can see all of the accounts and sub-accounts that are set up within the system. You can edit them, you can add new ones, and you can even categorize them as current assets, non-current assets, or whatever makes sense for your business. You can of course do journal entries. In the journal entry screen, this screen does have quite a bit of functionality. You can create an auto-reversing journal batch just by checking the checkbox. This will allow the entry to automatically reverse next period. You can set up recurring entries. If you need to make the same sort of entry month after month or however often, you can configure that here. It does allow for the same amount. If the entry is for the same amount every time, it's fixed. If you need to change the amounts every time, you can set it that way. As far as how often, you can do it every month, every period, every quarter, every number of days. You can configure when it should start, when it should end, or how many times it should generate, and it tracks a history of all the recurring entries. If it's just a one-time entry, we can add some detail lines here. We can select our account and optionally any sort of sub-account breakout. We can make our entry. Save. Another nice feature is along the way you'll see along the right you get running totals. You get a running debit total, running credit total, and the difference. This hopefully helps you keep track of where you're at in the batch, make sure everything is nice and balanced. If you happen to pick an account that is project related, you can enter the project information directly in this screen as well. You can select your project task and optionally any resource or labor information if it happens to be labor related. Once you're done and everything's balanced out, you can of course save and release and post it. Assuming you have access rights to do so, you can post it directly from within this screen. No need to run an additional process after that fact. There's also some flexible budgeting options within Beyond. We go to the budget and statistical entry. You can configure an unlimited number of budgets and budget versions. You can set up budget ledgers or statistical ledgers. Again, there's no limit or naming limit for that. I'll set up a new one. Now you can manually add your accounts and budget by the period for this year, or you can use import-export to Excel, which is quite nice. I'll select import-export. I will first choose to create a template. I will save my template to the desktop. And when creating this template, I can choose whether or not I want to budget at the department level or not. I'm going to choose not to. You can also choose what accounts you plan on budgeting for, whether you want to do all of your accounts or maybe you only want to budget your revenue and expenses. I'll select Begin Processing. And this will create a template for us. So I'll say OK. Let's take a look at what that looks like. My budget import template file on the desktop. I'll open that in Excel. And you can see the template that it created for us is very user-friendly here. It's listed out all of our accounts, the account description, and added columns for all the periods. so that now we can easily type in or paste in our budgets directly in Excel. Once we're happy with the budget, we can save it and close out. Now back and beyond, we can now import that file. Import, select our file, and begin. Once it's imported, we can see our budget has been imported, all of our accounts are there, and our numbers are there. Quick and easy and user-friendly. No need to decrypt some cryptic import process or deal with CSV files or other borderline developer type code. It's a really simple export the template, nice user-friendly interface, enter in your budget, and then re-import it in. Next up, if we go to Generate Allocation Journals, from here you can generate your allocations based on your allocation methods that you have set up. And in this Generate screen, it is kind of nice. It gives you a summary of what allocations you have set up, whether they're dynamic or fixed percent, how often you should run them, monthly or quarterly or whatever. It even gives you a summary of what kind of money is sitting in your source account to give you an idea of what's about to be allocated if you were to run this. From within here, if you wanted to see more details about what you're going to run, you can directly jump to the allocation method setup just by clicking these nice little links here. So if we wanted to see what the allocate taxes method was doing, it'll take us straight here, and I can see it's a dynamic percent, allocating quarterly. Here's my source account, and here's my destination. My destination is set up to allocate based on basis accounts, and I actually have it configured to pull the basis account balances out of a statistical ledger. We could look at the other one. If I click on allocate rent, it'll pull that one up. And in this one, it's just a fixed percent. Again, I'm taking rent expense and divvying it out by a set percentage to various other accounts. Once you have some transactions in the system, the next obvious step is you want to see what that looks like through some reporting options. If we go to the General Ledger Transaction Console, this is a great starting point for any sort of reporting that you might do. At its most basic level, it's going to list out every transaction posted in the system. So this can be, if you needed to track down a very specific transaction, you can find it in here. But you can get much more creative and useful with this. Say you wanted a more trial balance look and feel to this. We can take the period to post and drag it up to the top, and now everything's grouped by period. Then we can take the account and drag it up there and subgroup it by the account code. Now we have a nice summary of our total transactions by period, and it gives us summary totals. And if we expand on this, now we can see a breakdown by account, the total for each of our accounts. And if we expand on that, we can see the details about every transaction that makes up that balance. And if we wanted to actually see the source, so if I want to drill more into where did this negative $200 come from, there's a hyperlink here. I can jump straight to the source transaction and see exactly what it looks like. So very flexible and interactive using this GL Transaction Console to do what you want. If you like the arrangement, you can of course save this view. Say if I only wanted to see things from my HA1001 project, I can filter on that just by typing HA1001 and then filter. And now I only see transactions for that particular project. You can filter on any of these columns. You can add additional columns, rearrange it, do whatever it is you need to do. If you needed to export this to Excel, you can also do that as well. We'll take a look at consoles in more detail later, but this gives you a brief idea of just some of the things that are possible in terms of GL reporting just within this console. There are of course other options. There are a number of reports available. So if you wanted to run a GL trial balance report, you can run it from our reports menu. And you are presented with quite a number of filtering and grouping options that you can do. You can filter down by the account. You can choose to show totals or not. You can provide detail or summary mode. You can pick what period you want to run this for. You can even filter on what kind of transactions you want to see. Lots of flexible options here. And once it's generated, you're presented with a report. These are all SQL Server Reporting Services reports. And you can, from here, you can do with them whatever you need. If you need to print it to a printer, you can print it. If you need to export it to a file, you can do so as well. There's quite a number of formats you can export, of course, PDF, Excel, Word, etc. You can even add this to a favorites. If this is a report you're going to be running on a recurring basis, you can add it to your favorites menu, or you can change the reporting options. So you want to change what period, or switch to summary or something like that. Again, we'll take a look at reporting a little bit later in the video, but this is just a brief look at the GL reporting. Finally, there are some financial reporting options. Say if you wanted to generate a balance sheet or income statement, you go to Setup and Financial Reporting rows. I'll select one of my existing reports, my income statement, and here there's quite a bit of flexibility in configuring your financial reporting, all built right into Beyond, to be able to display what accounts you want, what labels, what level of detail. You can add groupings, change groupings, add total lines, and really build out the look and feel of how you want your report to look. Once this is all defined, you can run this report by selecting Financial Reports, and I will run my income statement. There's quite a number of options in terms of what level of detail you want to see on this. And I will run my report. And it displays it. So using my setup and my column headers and the accounts that I picked for each section, and then the level of detail of current period versus YTD, actual budget and variance, it's displaying to me all the information that I need to know. Finally, period closing and year closing. You can choose to leave periods open, or you can close them out to help restrict entry to prior periods. And once it's closed, then only users who have access, special access rights to do so, can post to those prior closed periods. Now let's take a look at the Accounts Payable module. Back and Beyond, let's first take a look at the vendor setup. Payables vendor screen. I'll go ahead and select an existing vendor. We can see you can configure the expected types of information here: address information, vendor ID, vendor name. You can specify payment terms, vendor classes. You can put them on hold. You can specify default expense account. You can specify default payment methods, whether they need to have separate checks or any other special processing. You can specify their 1099 information, and you can also jump to various transaction details or transaction summary about this vendor. There's also notes and attachments capabilities here. You'll actually see this on a number of Beyond screens. Actually, most screens you can attach documents to or take notes on, and that's functionality that's available out of the box, no special setup required. So with the notes, it's a pretty rich set of note-taking abilities to log notes, who made the notes, descriptions, things like that. And attachments, you can attach files, attach URLs or things like that. I'll just attach a sample file here. Maybe there's some sort of PDF contract with this vendor or something like that that I want to attach in the system. I attach it, you can give it a name, attach, and there it is. Available for anyone else in the system to utilize if they're looking at this vendor. Once our vendors are set up, then it's usually time to enter some vouchers or invoices for them. Do that in the vendor invoice and adjustment screen. There is a lot of functionality in this screen as well. This is sort of becomes the go-to place for data entry. Voucher in here, you can regular vendor invoice, or you can enter adjustments. The adjustments can be either positive or negative to be able to adjust the balance up or down for the vendor. You can change the remit to information if you need to have the check go to someone else. You can specify recurring invoices here. Similar to the GL functionality, you can specify how often they are, when they happen, how many times you want them to happen. If you want to pay the document right away, or if you don't want it paid at all, you could specify that information here as well. If you want to put the document on payment hold because maybe the vendor is not approved, this way this invoice is going to be flagged as such until someone comes along and releases that. You can make some comments about what it is we're doing. You could even pay the document right away. You can enter, if you're going to hand write a check to them, you can enter that information here. Or if you need to print a check for them, you can enter the amount, save, and print the check directly from this. If I select an existing one, we can see that you do have options for entering quantity, unit cost, totals, the GL account that you're going to hit. If it's 1099 related, you can specify the 1099 box. If it's project related, you can specify the project. All the good information you'd expect to see. I'll pull up another invoice here. Here's an invoice that hasn't been paid yet. If for some reason I needed to reverse it, instead of having to do adjusting entries or doing weird things like cutting a zero check or anything like that, if I need to get rid of this invoice, there's a simple reverse vendor invoice button. I can click that and reverse it with a click of a button. So again, there's a lot of functionality in this screen. Once the documents are entered, usually the next step is to try and pay them. So if we go to payables, payment selection, and I will give my payment selection a description. And there's some filter criteria that I could specify if I'm looking for particular documents to pay, or I could just update the list and get me everything that needs to be paid. I can then pick and choose whether I want to pay all of these things or not. Maybe I only want to pay these bottom three. If I'm happy with this, I save and I complete my payment selection. And now these invoices are ready to be paid by a check. So I'll go to Financials, Payables, Print Checks. This takes me to a screen and shows me the checks that I've already selected and gives me the option to select what bank account I want to pay them out of. You can set up multiple bank accounts, and each of these bank accounts can then be tied to a specific check format. Within Beyond Software, we have a number of built-in check formats. We have 5 different check formats that correspond to various Deluxe Checks layouts. You can pick one of these layouts and actually tie it against a checking account. So each of your checking accounts can have their own default check format. Once those are selected, we can run our check report. And here's our checks. If we're happy with that, we're then presented with an option to keep, delete, or void those checks. So if check number 4 simply didn't print at all, I could choose to delete it. Or if check number 5 got stuck in the printer and has now been ruined, I could void that check. Or I could simply keep all, delete all, or void all of them. I'll say OK. And that completes check printing. In addition to printing checks, you can enter manual checks after the fact. If we go to Financials, Payables, Manual Payments, there's a number of options here. You can enter manually handwritten check. I could print a one-off check directly from this screen. I could even enter if I maybe paid that invoice with a credit card. I can select that I paid it with a credit charge. If for some reason I needed to void a check, we can do that pretty easily. Payables, void checks. I can go look for the check by check number, or I can just list out, maybe I know it was from this bank, list out all the checks I've written to that bank account. So maybe I just want to void check 13, click save, done. That check has now been voided, and that's all I had to do so. In terms of reporting, similar to General Ledger, one of the nice places to start is the Vendor Activity Console. This Activity Console out of the box will display a detailed list of all the documents in my payable system, but we can pretty quickly rearrange things here to make it a little more useful. I can grab the period and drag it up to the top. Then maybe I'll grab the vendor and group by that as well. So now I have a grouping, a summary of all my activity for this period. If I expand on that, now I have summary of all this activity by each vendor. If I expand on that, now I have the detailed list of all my activity for that particular vendor, the amounts, the document types, and all that good information. If I have a question about a specific line, again, I have this hyperlink capability. I can click on it, and it jumps me directly to invoice number 35, so I can see the details about what that was. There are also a number of sort of classical reports as well. Reports, run a report. Maybe we'll take a look at the AP aging. And again, we're presented with lots of options in terms of filtering or levels of detail, summary of detail, aging as of dates, our aging buckets, 30, 60, 90 days. I can override all of this or change it or leave it alone if I like. I'll view the report. And my report is displayed. And just like in other reports within the system, I can then print it to the printer, export it to a file, or even add it to my favorites menu if this is something I want to run going forward. Now let's take a look at the Accounts Receivable module. We begin with the customer screen. In the customer screen, you can set up a new customer and specify various defaults, or review an existing customer. If we take a look at an existing customer in more detail, we can see that there's some options to jump to more information about that customer, very similar to what we saw on the vendor screen. You can again attach notes or file attachments or URLs using the Notes and Attachments feature. You can enter the address, customer class, specify the terms, specify a credit limit. You can put them on hold, establish customer risk values, specify default accounts, billing options, and finance charge options are available. The classic open item versus balance forward statements, and how often you expect them to receive statements. And you can even store credit cards for that customer if you like. The credit card number is encrypted in the database behind the scenes, so the information is secure. Next up, we can enter some invoices. We can enter the invoices using the Customer Invoice and Adjustment screen. And again, similar to how we saw the vendor invoice screen laid out and the journal transaction screen laid out, there is a lot of functionality all within the same screen, so you don't have to go far to do a lot of different things. You can enter your classic invoices. You can also enter adjustments, again, positive or negative adjustments to adjust the balance up or down. If we take a look at an existing invoice, this screen does have the reverse button as well, so if you need to reverse it, you can do so with the click of a button. You can see the summary information about the invoice, the account that it hit, things like that. You can set up recurring invoices from within the same screen again, all the same options we saw in vendor and journal transaction. And you can even use the payment button in the bottom right to jump and enter a payment at the same time as you're entering the invoice. For payment entry is actually centralized within our cash module in the cash processing screen. within a single screen you can process all of your cash, whether that money came from customers or elsewhere. You can process customer payments or other cash deposits or bank transactions or other things like that, all in the same process. So here, for example, we could process October, specify which bank account you're going to be dealing with, and you can start adding detail lines. Again, within here you can specify what kind of transaction this is. This will be a customer payment. It'll default a lot of the information for me. It's $500 for this customer. It was a check number 123 whatever, check date, and save it. So you could save and release it as is and then apply it later, but if you want to apply this payment to a specific invoice right away, you can use the apply, and that takes you straight to the cash application screen where you see all of the open invoices for this customer, the balance, and I can just apply it. And now I applied the $500 to this invoice with the click of a button. If I had made a mistake, and I only noticed it after the fact, there is a payment correction screen. I can look up the payment that I need to correct, maybe the one I just entered. And if it was something just as simple as the date or the check number, I can change it right here and save it and be done. But if the amount was wrong, or if I just need to void it, I can select void customer payment and void it. Again, pretty simple. I select the payment, select void, set it to posted, done deal. If it's time to print statements, you can print customer statements. Again, this will feed off of the setup at the customer level, whether they want balance forward or open item, and how often they want them, and all that good stuff. There is some selection criteria here in terms of what type of statements you want printed and all that good stuff. Do you just want to do the monthly ones, or do you want to do everybody? Do you want to exclude people with no activity? Does a customer need to have a minimum balance to show up on a statement? Lots of different sorting options and lots of different printing options, whether you want to actually show the customer what their credit limit is or not. Once you're happy with the selection criteria, you can run the report. Prints it out in a reasonably nice format. The amount, the current balance, total at the end, any finance charges if there are any, along with aging buckets, and an optional message at the end that's configurable. You can then print this or save it to Excel or save it to PDF and send them. Other reporting options, again similar to what we saw in GL and AP, there is a customer activity console. This console, like the others, is really the starting point. It lists out all the documents. From there you can then start grouping things. Maybe you want to group by customer ID, and now you can see a summary by customer, and you can then drill down to see more information about each of the documents that makes up those balances. And using the links, if you want to know more about the customer, I could jump directly to that customer and see the customer setup. Or I could click on the document number link and jump directly back to the document that made up that invoice, so I can see where did that $100 come from and review it as needed. In addition to the console, there are of course some classic reports. We can take a look at the AR aging. Like most of the reports, there's a lot of different filtering and sort and detail options available. You can also specify your aging buckets here if you wanted to override that, otherwise they default. And you can run the report and see a classic aging, group by customer document. Amounts show up in the buckets. And then again, you can either print this, export it to PDF, save it to your favorites, or rerun it if you want to see it with different options. Now let's review the cash management module. Within cash, there are a few options. Cash processing. We've already sort of seen this in the accounts receivable module overview. This is where you would go to process all of your cash receipts. Any customer payments that come in, you can process them from in here, or you can process credit card transactions, cash deposits, or bank transactions. You can enter the transactions in the screen and optionally then apply those payments to customer invoices. Next screen is bank account reconciliation. This screen provides you the ability to reconcile your bank accounts. You can either start a new one or select an existing reconciliation. And you can select what bank account you want to reconcile, the beginning balance, and the statement date and the ending balance. And Beyond will display to you a list of all the transactions that were processed and provide an option to clear these records. So if this check cleared, I can select cleared. And then it updates the total buckets along the bottom. It'll display the total uncleared and the total cleared payments, deposits, and adjustments, and show you how far you're out of balance based on your beginning and ending balance and what you've cleared. Once you're in balance, you can save, post this reconciliation, and move on for next month or your next bank account. In addition, there is a bank reconciliation report in case you need help tracking something down. And on this report, it shows a summary of the bank reconciliation, the total of all the cleared adjustments, payments, documents, the calculated ending balance versus the entered ending balance, and lists out all the uncleared transactions, including details about the reference number, the user, the amount, and the date. Cash management also has two other features. One is a petty cash screen. You can use this to track petty cash accounts. I'll select an existing one. So you can define certain cash accounts as petty cash accounts and fund them for a certain amount. And then as things get used, you can easily add detail lines to track what that expense was for. Add the line, save it, and move on. Once you're done, you can post this and it'll actually create the journal transaction for you. Finally, there's a company credit card transaction screen. This screen allows you to import company credit card transactions from the credit card's website and then either automatically match those transactions to existing transactions in the system or spawn new transactions such as vendor invoices to account for those expenses. To see it in action, you would first select your credit card account, and then we can import our file. The file needs to be in an OFX, QFX, or QBO file format. Once selected and you select import, it will import the transactions from that file, and then we'll attempt to match them. So we can see this particular one, it automatically matched for us. It found a matching transaction, and we can see the matching details over on the right. This one we can see automatically created a transaction for us. It recognized the vendor and was able to create a payment and invoice for us. And these other two were unmatched, so we can either select Find Matching Transactions and manually match it up to something in the system, or we can create the transactions on the fly. We can create an invoice on the fly, and we can create the payment on the fly if need be. Now let's take a look at a couple of quick items in terms of Beyond Software's architecture. Beyond Software is a hosted solution. The data center is hosted, so there's no major IT investment needed on your part. Backups and upgrades are handled for you and become very simple. It's also simple to create test environments whenever you might need one to test a new setup or to help train a new user. Software is built on web services and utilizes a modern SQL Server reporting engine. There's also a flexible and granular security model to help secure various screens, processes, and reports. Let's take a quick look at that. In Beyond, under Administration, Setup, Roles, there's a number of out-of-the-box roles configured and targeted to specific types of users. For example, if we took a look at the time and expense user role, we can see that they have access rights to things like entering timesheets and expense reports. They also have a few standard reports, such as an expense report and printing a project timesheet. Compare this against the system administrator role, which gives full rights to everything, all processes, all screens. If you wanted to create your own role, you can either start one from scratch or make a copy of one that already exists using the Save As feature. I'll name it. And now I'll get to tweaking the access rights just how I like. Maybe for this new role, I don't want any access to financials or administration, but I do want full rights within project and reports. Except I don't plan on using daily timesheets, so I'm going to remove that. I don't plan on using resource scheduling, so I'll turn that off as well. Then on the other screen, I want users in this role to be able to approve things except their own. So I'm going to unselect Approve My Expense Report and Approve My Timesheet. And I can then begin adding users to this role through the user screen, or I can add users directly in here, simply by selecting the users who should belong in this role. I select Save, and I'm done. This concludes our demonstration of the various capabilities of Beyond Software. Thank you for your time.